Hello YouTube, welcome back. This is part 1 of forging some shears. So in this part we are going to start creating a blank for these shears. Now we're going to be making these out of wrought iron and spring steel. Wrought iron is 12 by 20. So to start off, make sure you have a nice sharp piece of chalk, and I will mark up the wrought iron. I will put the first mark at 1 inch, the second mark at 3.5 inches, and the third mark at 4.5 inches. And taking a square, I will make sure I have some nice straight lines. So for the spring steel, I will just put a mark 1 inch from either end. Now these were centre dotted off camera. So to start with, I will remove the 4.5 inches of wrought iron from the parent bar. I'll do that over the cutting plate of the anvil. And then I will forge a flat scarf either end. Now because the cutting edges of the shears have to face each other, these scarves have to be on opposite sides of the wrought iron. And the scarves are there to aid in welding the spring steel to the end of the bar. So just to make sure I get the spring steel in the right place, I will just do a chisel mark 1 inch from the end of the scarf, and this is where the centre dots are, so it's a little bit more than 1 inch. And I will scarf both ends of the spring steel as well in exactly the same manner, and that will just ensure that the weld goes in neatly without galling the materials. And for the spring steel, I will cut most of the way through the bar, and that will allow me to snap it off once it's been welded in place. Now as you'll see, this didn't quite work out the way I planned, but I will touch on that when we get to it. So at this stage I will pile up the fire. Those of you who've seen my videos before know that I like to have a nice big neutral layer in the middle of the fire. If you're not aware of what this is, check out the scarf welding video I did. So I will lay the materials on top of the fire to get them to absorb the heat, and then I will flux them heavily with a mixture of borax, silver sand and iron filings, and go for a scarf weld. Now for some reason this didn't take. As you can see, it snapped off, so what I resorted to doing was amputating the spring steel off the end of the bar and just laying it flat on top of the wrought iron, like such. And I did this for both ends in the end. So just lay it on the fire and let the wrought iron absorb all the heat. Reflux. Now the wrought iron can go well above its burning temperature because it's self-fluxing because of the silica content in between the laminations of the wrought iron. So lay that on there, get the whole thing up to a welding temperature, and go for a faggot weld. Now I'm giving nice steady blows, and you can see that that worked. So I took 1 heat to tack it, 1 heat to weld, and 1 heat to blend in. And the blending heat ended up turning into forging heat, where I started forging it to section at close to a welding temperature. Now these welds went in absolutely beautifully, very happy with how they turned out. So as you can see, just getting rid of any hammer marks, forging it to section, losing my hammer. So to make sure that the steel faces end up facing each other, I will put a centre dot on the steel mark on the steel side, just so that I know where they are. These marks will mostly disappear when I'm forging this to section, but as long as I'm aware which side is the steel face, I'll be a happy man. So at this stage, with everything welded and blended in quite nicely, I will start forging out the blank to section. Now I didn't actually measure what section I forged it to, I just made sure that it was an even thickness and an even width all the way along the bar, with a slight taper towards the tips. I'm using my nice broad-faced hammer in order to make sure that I don't get any hammer marks in this. And here is part 1 of the blank. So off camera I've measured and marked up, and we have 2.5 inches from the end, then a further 1 inch, half inch, 1 inch, and 2.5 inches marked. And these are all centre dotted. So the first thing I'll do is pop a spring fuller in the Hardy, and I will start defining the actual spring on the shears. So find the mark and do a double set down with a spring fuller. I'll keep rotating this because your spring fuller will fuller in unevenly. So by turning it, you'll negate that and make sure that you get a nice even double set down. You can see the spring starting to appear right now. So next I will head over to the bick, and that mark, which was 2.5 inches from the end of the bar, I will set down evenly, dressing the thickness, making sure it's straight as I go along. Now, the other way you can do that is you can do your set down, and you can then continue on the bick, dressing the thickness as you go along, rather than having to go to the flat of the anvil. Both methods work. You still have to dress this on the flat on the flat face of the anvil anyway. It's whatever you prefer. So hammer control is quite important. You need to hit exactly where you mean to. So at the stage, make sure you're scrubbing it regularly, and just start dressing this to be a fair straightness, a fair thickness. Make sure everything's nice and straight and square. Now, as you can see, the way I forge, it's a bit like a power hammer. Where possible, the hammer will stay in the same place over the anvil, and I will just move the work accordingly. It's not particularly easy to do that with this piece because of the double set down on the spring, but you get the gist of it. So at this stage I will, at close to a welding heat to save delamination from the steel and the wrought iron, I will set down the tip of the blade of the shears and just bring that to a dull taper. And that'll save getting a carp's mouth later on when I actually forge these to a proper blade section. So again, keep it straight, keep it with even thickness, keep it without any hammer marks, and give it a straighten afterwards. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Rowan, me old China, you've put the spring in the wrong plane. Don't worry about that, because the section between the blade and the spring will be rounded, and we will then twist the blades 90 degrees so they are at a diagonal from the spring. So this is purely dressing work, and I'm doing this at a dull heat in order to planish the work, remove the hammer marks, etc. And here we have the blank forged, ready for the spring to be created, the handles to be rounded, and the blades to be forged. Now, as you can see here, the weld has gone in absolutely beautifully. Tiny faintest of marks where the weld is, but I'm not too worried about that because I'm fairly sure it's a strong weld. So if you're able to, get up to this stage if you want to have a go, and then the next part we'll move a little bit further on with this project. So thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one. So do give a like to this video or comment if you have any questions. If you enjoy watching this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. is my current list of Patreon donors. Thanks a lot, guys. You really are helping me out a lot. So thanks again, and I will see you on the next one.